keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With yougov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with yougov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with yougov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta, Jeff the Juice Cohen, and a very special guest this week, Nicole Pike from yougov. Nicole, welcome. What we do here, if you're new, is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. And best of all, on this live stream, we get to do it live with you guys. You get to get in our faces, ask questions, challenge us. It makes it that much more fun. We welcome you guys. If you're lurking, if you're watching this after the fact or listening to this after the fact, we know so many of you, thousands of you do. We appreciate you also, but make sure next time we do this every Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Bring a friend, bring a colleague, come for the live show. It's so much more fun. How is everyone doing this week? Nicole, great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. Ben's been snagging all of our yougov appearances, so happy to be the one on this time.
Ben has been hogging the appearances. Jeff, how you doing?
Very good, very good. I feel like I was not here last week, so it's good to be back. I missed it. I was over in Europe. Or was there one? I think there was one last week. You guys did one, I think. I don't know.
We did do one last week.
The show never stops.
It was
I recorded from Dubai, so I don't think being in Europe is an excuse, but glad to have you back.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Guys, we have a lot of stuff to get through this week. I do want to tease the podcast episode this week. We had Liam Savarese from Bottissimo. Bottissimo, actually a cool company. I would call them a competitor to like a Stream Elements or maybe a Stream Labs. But it's interesting because they're owned by Optic Gaming. And so they serve streamers, content creators, and esports teams with like monetization and overlays and kind of all the stuff that a Stream Elements does. But they have sort of this parent company that's an esports team, which is cool because they get to test stuff with Optic. So it's an interesting conversation with Liam from Bottissimo. Definitely recommend to check that out. That will be out this week. Let's jump into some news, guys. Let's jump into news this week. And we've got David Beckham and Guild Esports. Let's start with that news because I thought this was interesting. I think we were critical in the beginning of the deal. There was a lot of money that they were paying to David Beckham. And now I feel like this has fixed itself. And I'm a big proponent of what's happened here. The headline here is David Beckham renegotiates delegation deal with Guild Esports Club. And so the gist of this is they had this $15.25 million deal between David Beckham and Guild Esports that was going to be paid over 5 years. Obviously, David Beckham was going to promote Guild Esports. And what has happened is Guild has successfully, it seems, renegotiated the deal where basically he's only going to get half of that. Instead of 15, he's getting 7.5, again, paid over 5 years. But what's interesting is Beckham is getting 20% of Guild Esports sponsorship and merchandising revenue. So assuming he brings money to the table, it's good for Guild Esports and it's good for David Beckham. I'm curious, what you guys think of a deal like this being renegotiated. Seems like a clear win for Guild here, because there's less money out of their pocket and more upside for them. But I would argue good deal for David Beckham also, right? Does anyone think this was maybe not such a good deal for David Beckham?
We're all quiet here. I think scared to go first. I'm happy to jump into it. It's interesting because when you usually talk about sports deals, right, with athletes like Beckham, who I hear is more of a brand ambassador, there's risks of injury, and guaranteed money, upfront money is always their primary focus and concern. You hear it all the time in the off season. Again, risk of injury, competitive players and athletes, less so brand ambassadors here. I think this has tremendous upside. I mean, the risk to me is time, and how much time David Beckham has to push Guild Esports as opposed to anything else that he's involved in. But if he took the deal, then he thinks he has the time to make that 20% in excess, or realize a value of in excess of that additional 7.5 million. So I think he's betting on himself. I think Guild is favorably converting him or mobilizing him, I think, with a lot of incentive. 20% is not a small amount. And the guaranteed 7.5, if you're Beckham, 7.5 and 15, there's not a lot of difference there to you, right? So the potential, as well as the legacy and the brand that he's growing, to your point, Paul, I think these are straight wins all around. The only concern I would have had would be his time to devote here, and he clearly thinks he has that.
Yeah, and super interesting to see this come off the back of the announcement that Guild brought on Sky as a sponsor, and I think one of they're quoting the biggest European sponsorship deals in esports for an esports team to date. So interesting that, wouldn't surprise me if those were interconnected in some way. Also feel like there was a lot of backlash when it was first announced what his initial deal looked like. And you guys had your thoughts on it, but just more generally. And so it's also maybe a bit of a case of what we see a lot in esports, where fans speak up. They speak up when something isn't as they think it should be, and all of a sudden the org seems to realign a bit.
Any coincidence here? Guild Esports making better decisions now that they're working with YouGov?
I sure hope so, but I hope there's not a coincidence. But no, good to see them, like I said, listening to the fans, whether that's from social media or complaints they get, or from our data.
Jeff, you had a comment you were going to.
Well, us were kind of the same as Jimmy's and Cole's. I think this deal does a good job of much better aligning incentives for both Beckham and Guild. The question I had was more foundational, going back to our questions that we had when the deal first came out. Was kind of like, how authentic is David Beckham to esports? Like, I'm not familiar how much of a gamer he is, or how much gamers have affinity towards him. I'm sure YouGov probably has a ton of data on that, maybe not at hand immediately, but that would be something I'd be curious to understand, like just how well that sponsorship has gone for them. Because obviously David Beckham, massive international superstar, but like I don't know if the average gamer was like an English soccer fan in like the mid 2000s. Like I don't know how much overlap there necessarily is between those two groups. So that's what I would be more curious about, like how, when they first started the deal, did it just come about because this was the most famous name they could get? Which, to be fair, it's a very famous name, so good on them. Or was there some like rationale why David Beckham makes sense to be like the face of an esports team?
I mean, the take I have on that is, because I'm usually the first to call that out, Jeff, right? I'm usually the first to say, hey, this, what is the overlap here? They should be getting YouGov data to figure out how many fans actually overlap. But David Beckham is one of those probably a dozen people in the world that's just so well known and has such a huge following that inevitably it probably overlaps everything in some, like, I don't think it's fair to say David Beckham is just like soccer fans from the 1990s, right? Like, or early 2000s or whatever. It is, I think when you have 100 million followers or whatever the number is, inevitably you're going to overlap other ways in other places.
So
Adam here
data hot off the presses here from YouGov. I just kind of popped it open to look of. So we look at athletes, former and current, across a bunch of different sports. And among esports fans, I just quickly looked at the US. David Beckham is actually the most positively rated former soccer player in the world. So there you go.
Well, and he played in the US, right? So there's overlap there for that market. So
Sure.
I feel like it's interesting to see that the data backs it up.
Yeah, well, I think Guild definitely like wanted that UK identity too. You see a lot of those esports orgs based in the UK really kind of focusing on that. So yeah, good on them.
Coming from LA, but two guys, when Beckham came to the Galaxy, it was electric. We were all huge fans. It was the biggest thing to attract someone of that caliber to us. So just wanted to piggyback with a personal anecdote on Nicole's comment.
Adam says, really smart move by Guild. Do you think this shows that just having a face of your franchise is too early on for esports teams, mainly for funding purposes? Interesting question. Like, is it wrong to have a big name early on, or like, is it mainly for funding, you think, or is there a point in the life of an esports team where it makes sense to bring on the big name? Is there a too early?
I don't think there's too early. It also depends on how involved that person is, right? Like if they're a founder and they're going to day-to-day, like it's something they're passionate about and they're going to day-to-day be operating the business, then I think that it's great to have them on obviously as early as possible. If they're just going to be like a sponsor and a name, you know, it seems like a waste of your own equity and or money if you're bringing someone in before you like build the rest of the infrastructure. But you could kind of say that about a lot of things. Like I wouldn't bring in a really good salesperson per se before building like the actual organization, the players, and just like it seems like you're putting the cart before the horse in that case. But if the celebrity is the founder, then obviously that changes the calculus.
Yeah, I mean, I loved this deal for David Beckham initially because I felt like he got the benefit of having an esports team attached to his name, which a lot of professional sports stars want, right? They're sort of hedging their bet on the future. And he was getting paid to do it, right? So it was kind of like a win-win. The renegotiated deal, though, feels more aligned now, right? Where he actually has to do work to drive, you know, upside for himself. And therefore it's a win-win for, you know, both him and for Guild. I like this deal a lot better just for both sides. But initially, I mean, Adam, to your question, it was definitely not too early for David Beckham, right? Like David Beckham was getting a payday. I don't think it was too early for him. Was it too early for Guild? Look, they got funded, they got public, they got a bunch of, you know, people's attention because of it. Hard to debate that or what the value of that is. In the end, as long as it works out, sort of, I think I'm a big believer that sort of no one cares, right? There's like a golf expression that there's no pictures on the scorecard. Like if Guild Esports is successful because of David Beckham, whether they hired him day 1 or day 100, do we really care? Does it really matter? The goal is success. And if he helps drive that, that's a good thing. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about Disney. Disney in the news. This headline, Jimmy, I thought about you the second I read the headline. And the headline is, Disney reportedly wants 2 Star Wars games per year. So the publisher, the subheadline says, the publisher is said to be pushing for 1 big AAA game and 1 smaller game every fiscal year going forward. They're betting big on Star Wars internally. Insider Gaming reports that Lucasfilm is on board for the plan as well. And they have a list of upcoming projects. How many of these see the light of day, I guess we'll see. But they include Jedi Survivor from Respawn, Star Wars Eclipse from Quantic Dream, the competitive shooter Star Wars Hunters, and Untitled games from Skydance Media, Respawn, and Ubisoft. So a bunch of Star Wars games in the works. Disney bought, as we know, because we've used it many times as a benchmark, bought Star Wars for $4 billion, which still in 2022 discussion still seems ridiculously cheap. But they've not made a whole lot of Star Wars games since 2012. Now they want to make 2 per year. I guess the question I have for you guys is, do you buy the strategy from Disney? Do you think we will see 2 games per year? And Nicole, maybe for you, again, I think there's interesting sort of, they should be probably talking to YouGov if they're not already. Is there demand for 2 Star Wars games a year? Like, or are we just all assuming that people love Star Wars without real data behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, as with most things, devil is probably in the details when we say what kind of games is it, one console PC game and then one little mobile something or other where you could be hitting 2 totally different audiences. So there's definitely that, but part of me feels like they're starting to kind of become this intermixing or even confusing between the cycles of like the Netflix entertainment industry versus the video game entertainment industry. And is there really that appetite for, something to churn through that quickly? And even more so, can you even create a decent game that quickly on and that consistently that and then compete with all the other ones coming out? It feels aggressive to me. Let's just say.
Kieran says, "Oh man, deja vu Star Wars games." I mean, let me expand Kieran's point here, which is Disney has a really bad track record with games, right? They have not been able to consistently put out very high quality games on time, at least not to match the hype that surrounds their games. And so is part of the problem the outsourced business model here? That they don't own any studios really, and they're all outsourcing it to other studios, and therefore they don't have total control or creative control necessarily. Like, does anyone think the outsourced business model is the problem?
I would argue that's their strength and why they're able to do so many games and commit to an aggressive schedule like this. If they were trying to tackle this all in-house, yeah, they 1 a year would be ambitious, I think. But because they're outsourcing it, not only can they try to commit to a larger volume of titles, they can also say, hey, this one developer, that game didn't hit for one reason or another, but maybe Ubisoft or whomever else that was on that list, they'll have more success there, not only because of their skill and their history in creating games, but just the overall fit with Disney's schedule, with the audience. The one thing I love about the Star Wars universe is, it's not just Jedi, right? And the Force. As Andor, if any of you guys are watching that show, which is really, really great, is showing us there's this whole other side of the universe, right? Scoundrels and espionage and some of these games that they had mentioned, if you guys continue to read, are set in different eras and different time places. The universe, the IP is so massive, and Disney has only made a very small amount of that canon since their acquisition. So I'm excited for a couple of things. I'm excited to see more titles that develop or explore different areas of the Star Wars universe that have nothing to do with the Force, that have nothing to do with Jedi, that have nothing to do with the Empire and the Republic. I'm also excited to see different developers on what they can accomplish with an FPS versus a mobile game versus an RPG, because I agree with you guys that it's a lot, it's ambitious, but I think if you are able to create something for different audiences and different gamers on their preference, that maybe you don't need 2 a year to be successful. You really need 1 in 2 years, I think, to be successful, and then you double down on that and you go back and you create the sequel and you revisit it.
But Nicole brought up a great point, which was part of this feels like they're trying to emulate the Netflix kind of release cadence, right? Where you have to have a new Witcher every year, and you have to have a new whatever season of whatever every year, and people expect it constantly, like more and more around the same IP on a much faster basis. Is that a fair like apples to apples comparison? Because part of me thinks that the Netflix model is the way it is because once you've watched the 8 episodes of The Witcher that season, you're done, right? Like you don't need to come back for more. Whereas a game could easily keep you for 6 months, 12 months, like depending how what kind of game and how good the game is. Like, is it a fair comparison? And should we be thinking about gaming in the same way?
Yeah, it's interesting. It goes against kind of the more recent model we've seen, where with most game publishers, they try to milk out a franchise or even one title for as long as possible and just add new experiences or modes or whatever it may be, and just build on top of. This is kind of going back to the old school, like when the Nintendo Wii was it, and you just had these kind of like almost mini game experiences coming out every quarter or so.
Yeah, I'm not convinced 2 a year is the right answer, right? I'm not even convinced that there's demand for that. I think people want just one really good Star Wars game, and that's probably good enough. Because you don't see 2 Lord of the Rings games every year, and you don't see 2 Marvel games every single year. You don't, right? Like, why not apply this to every single big piece of IP?
I think Jimmy and Nicole made a good point. It's games for different audiences, right? Like the person who's going to play an FPS is maybe not, the same person who's going to play like the espionage role-playing game. So I don't necessarily think 2 a year. Maybe you're right. Maybe it should be like 3 in 2 years or something. Whatever, like whatever number you want to make it. But I do think if we look at the last 10 years, it's basically 3. Right? I think you have the Respawn title and you have the 2 from EA, and obviously that's because for a while EA had the exclusive PC console license. So I think it is probably a good thing for Star Wars fans that EA no longer has that exclusively. They're able to go to these other third parties. The conversation earlier that Jimmy had, I think is an interesting one as well, about whether it's better to do this outsourced or not. I think with outsourced you get a better chance of one of the games being good, but you also have a lot of different hands in the pot where it becomes hard when you're the outsourced development studio working on the IP, working with the internal team as well. Like I think that always becomes challenging when you're dealing with like storytelling. I think we've heard a lot of licensees having an issue with that with Disney in the past.
Yeah, the risk is you make a bad game when you're making this many games, and then the IP gets burned. It's not like Respawn that gets burned or Quantic Dream that gets burned, right? People only remember the bad Star Wars game. Let me get caught up on comments here. Kieran says there are so many non-canon stories that are so sick. It's true. I mean, the universe is large. There's no question the IP is vast enough that you could produce probably 5 games a year, right? Like there's no lack of stories to tell. I don't think that's the issue. Christian says, something's telling me Battlefront's going to become the next Call of Duty where we see the nth iteration every year / other year. I mean, have they committed to more Battlefronts? That would be great, I think. But it's always felt a little bit like a Battlefield reskin. That's the problem, as opposed to being its own unique property. I don't know if they've ever treated it like its own unique property. Kieran says, I think there's a huge opportunity for a Warframe or Destiny-esque experience in the Star Wars universe. I mean, you're not going to, well, you're going to get an argument from anyone on this panel? Probably not, but I do think that would be fantastic. JM says, hey, everyone, missed last week, but glad I caught you guys. JM, welcome. 2 games per year is a bit ambitious, in my opinion. I think we all agree it's probably ambitious for Disney, and the risk of making a bad game is high. Kieran says, I think the counter argument to that is the large expanded universe or non-canon content that Star Wars has. They have enough content to make a game for every genre every year for 100 years with no issue. Kieran agreed. They have this. I mean, but again, I would argue that about any franchise. Like you could do Lord of the Rings games with the amount of written content and story and history and lore. Like you could make 5 games a year for the next 20 years. Matt says, I think this is an outsourcing issue, like Jimmy mentioned. We don't need 2 Star Wars games a year. We need 1 really good game every 3 years. Just look at GTA 5. They keep bringing updates to it 8 years later. I mean, an open world game like GTA where Disney just pours all their resources into that I think would be more interesting. Having witnessed Jimmy playing Knights of the Old Republic on his Switch religiously, I know you'd be up for that, Jimmy, right? All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk about everyone knows he's probably my favorite streamer. xQc in the news, even though he's controversial. I think that's probably why I like him. And the headline here from .esports, Ludwig and xQc are partnering up for an opportunity that could take Twitch's top streamer to new heights. So what has happened here is he used to be on Twitch. He's now on YouTube. Content creator Ludwig recently launched a creative agency called Off Brand. And the idea is to help fellow content creators plan, produce, and fund events and series. Off Brand, led by Ludwig, they've announced their first client, who is Twitch's most popular streamer, xQc, and he's getting a new game show called Juiced. The show is going to be, I don't know if it was in this article or it was in this article, where they talk about how it's inspired by 90s Nickelodeon game shows. So people will get slimed in some way. I think they will get actually juiced, and it will be a game show. So they're going to be doing, contestants will compete in trivia and other some physical things. It's going to be done in studio, like very professionally. And so far, it's the only thing Off Brand has announced, but it's a big announcement. Ludwig, xQc, and this new agency Off Brand teaming up to make a new show, Juiced. I mean, Jeff, I have to start with you. You're going to hire Jimmy to sue, right? I mean,
they did not come to me to get permission for this. So I feel, number one, yeah, Jimmy, get on him. Number two, I have to say this has a little bit of like I'm getting like some Venn vibes. Like I don't know, like something about this seems very Now, to be fair, these people may, and I know you hate the word authentic, Paul, but they may be more authentic than Venn. So the actual execution of this, they're way, but these are some of the biggest stars out there. So they may actually be able to take this concept and have it work. But yeah, you can't tell me this wasn't an exact thing from the Venn pitch deck. Like, hey guys, like people love game shows. Like gamers love game shows. Let's make a game show. Like it's kind of like, I don't know. It seems very like something that was in their business plan.
Before I get anyone else's, I want to read some of the comments. Because Adam says, just read this, seems like an opportunity for Jeff to get involved on the Juiced production. So Jeff, maybe there's an announcement here coming. And Ben says, Jeff the Juice Cohen is getting slimed on this show, right? I mean, you do have to go on as a contestant, I feel like, at the very least.
I'm in.
Nicole, your thoughts on this?
I have a question back. Have they said where this will actually air, or if they've confirmed who's picking it up, or is this just going to be a Twitch stream, or all still TBD? Because that part is interesting with the Venn connection, right? Of like, okay, there could be a potential audience, but where is it actually going to be?
It says little is like, I didn't see it in the article, so I don't know. I would be surprised if it was not on Twitch or YouTube. Like I don't think this is going to be on NBC. I would be very surprised if it was, but I'm curious. What do you think is the right place for it?
I mean, I think online or streamed for sure, just kind of given the audience. I think what's interesting is I feel like there's still kind of just in the broader media industry, this idea that like if we can just find the right thing, we'll bring all the gamers back to linear TV. Like I hope that we don't continue to perpetuate that. Like, all right, let's just try to return people. Like instead, why don't we meet them where they are? And I'd be curious to see if the flip side of that is, can the company producing it actually get money for it? Or are they like, great, yeah, we're gonna make a really cool show and you can put it on your Twitch channel, but is Twitch gonna pay for that to be there? I don't know. It's a catch-22.
I think it's super insightful because I don't know why there's some psychology around this where everyone who makes content online, right? Like the same way we're making a stream now, or xQc streams, or Ludwig makes YouTube videos. There's this draw towards becoming more like linear TV, right? Like higher production value in an expensive studio, and a show that's maybe a bit more scripted, not as, there's this draw towards that when all of their success came from something that's the exact opposite of that, which it confuses me to no end, right? Like xQc, part of his draw is he's everything's off the cuff. He's a little all over the place. He says things that are controversial. He's not the guy I would want streaming live on a game show, highly produced game show. This, to me, this has to be pre-recorded. Like I don't know anyone that would want xQc live, running a game show with what he could say. And if it's pre-recorded and it's sort of packaged and edited, well, then you sort of lose the magic of the guy, right? Like,
it's not him anymore. Yeah.
It's not him anymore.
Yeah.
It's some like diluted version of him. And so this confuses me. I'm so bearish on this, which I don't want to be, because I like all the people involved and I think they're all incredible creators and incredibly talented. But why not stick to what made you famous in the first place? I don't know, Jimmy, if you have thoughts. Or
no, you guys are hitting all the right points. It's definitely a dangerous pivot. There's no shortage of the ability here to do unique, fun, creative things. The difficulty, to Nicole's point, is if you can monetize it, and to your point, Paul, and Jess, if it loses the magic and the authenticity of what made that brand or person famous in the first place. And I don't see this first attempt, just again, it's hard evaluating all these different components that are essentially just evaluating potential. It's hard to see this one being all that successful. That's not to say that they might not find something that works with other streamers or another concept that backs it. I do think there is some ability to take these guys offline, do something produced and scripted, and have relevant, some type of measurable success there. This one just doesn't. It's hard to be the first, to do that, and then this one just doesn't. xQc especially, right? Like that's his brand, is just going off the cuff and off these rants and being so raw. And if you take that away from him, I'm not sure what's left. Not to say that he doesn't have a lot to offer, but that's what drives his audience, I think, and what makes him so fun.
And if you're going to get away from that, my view is go all the way. Like, have the guts to go all the way. Put it on NBC, and it's a produced show, Thursday night, prime time. Like, fine, you want to go and make that very polished kind of TV game show, do it. And you want to do it with a character like xQc, fine. But it's always this in between that doesn't seem to find success, right? And I think that was my criticism of Venn, where it was like, it's too highly produced to be on Twitch. No one really cared about sort of the high production value shows, but it was not enough to go to have a life on NBC. Jeff, you were shaking your head. I don't know if you had something before I get caught up on comments here.
Nope, I was in agreement.
Let me get caught up. I missed a few here. Matt says xQc is your favorite. Dr. Disrespect is in shambles. They're both my favorite, Matt. Why can't I have two favorites? Christian says, as someone who watches streamers from time to time, there's no way I'm watching this. I mean, that's one data point, I guess. I like when Misgift did Schooled. It was structured, but there was some room for the streamers on the show to be who they are. In situations where xQc can't just fire off whatever's on his mind, he's not the same person. Agreed. OTK has done, I feel like, has done better than most in terms of finding a balance there. They did Schooled, they did Loot Goblin. They've done a few of these, right, where it's sort of low budget game show streamed on Twitch and everyone is still allowed to be themselves. So I agree. All right, guys, let's, before we get to our next topic, I just wanted to, Nicole, give you an opportunity. I know I always talk about YouGov and our relationship with YouGov, but I'd love in your own words, just for our audience, what's the crux of what you guys have to offer a lot of the people who listen to our show, and what makes YouGov really special in terms of the data that you provide?
Yeah, totally. So, and thanks again for everything you guys do for and with us. We love BOE and everything about you guys. So YouGov, as I'm sure a lot of listeners know, we offer both syndicated and custom research. Our company as a whole goes across all industries, but we have a specific team, including myself, Ben, who you've heard on the show, and many others who are 100% focused on esports and gaming, which is huge. Any research company can throw a few data points at you on who an esports fan is, but when you're talking to and working with and using data that's built by people who know it inside out, it makes a big difference. And we really, especially for the BOE crowd, our YouGov Profiles tool that focuses on understanding who esports fans are, and especially kind of how that intersects with sponsorship opportunities, brands, is really where I know several listeners of your show are using our data every day as clients to help build out pitch decks, prove the value of partnerships by tracking them over time, and lots more.
Yeah, and recently, we covered with Ben last week a lot of or 2 weeks ago now, the metaverse research report that you guys put out, which I thought was fascinating in terms of people's response to that. I think I'm quite sure I know it is linked from our landing page. So I'm putting in all the chats, yougov.com/BOE. Go make sure you download that report. And obviously, if you want to be in touch with YouGov, you're looking for data that is actionable, that is constantly being updated, that gives you like deep insight and ability to make good decisions, like the Guild Esports folks who are making good decisions now. We really encourage all of our listeners to reach out to YouGov, or to reach out to myself or to Jimmy, and we can put you in touch with Nicole directly. Or Nicole, I know people can follow you on LinkedIn and everywhere else and reach out to you directly. So thank you for the support of BOE. And I want to encourage everyone to go to yougov.com/BOE. We also put up all the segments that we've done with YouGov, where we've gone through a bunch, like they've pulled a whole bunch of free research for you guys that is incredibly insightful. And I know we have used some of it in our own pitch decks and things like that. So go to yougov.com/BOE and take advantage of what's there. And thank you again. All right, guys, let's move on. I want to talk about Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk in the news. We've been so down on Cyberpunk for so long. Maybe this is the redemption story of the year, the redemption arc of the year, whatever you want to call it. And the headline is, CD Projekt says Cyberpunk 2077 is now attracting 1 million players daily. Senior developer thanks players for second chance following recent resurgence. So they're getting 1 million players daily. And they've actually published this. It says earlier today, Cyberpunk hit 86,000 concurrent players on Steam, which was its highest total since January 2021. So a year and a half later, they're hitting new highs. And the recent spike, it says, follows the launch of the game's 1.6 patch, which added features, improvements, and a half-price discount on Steam. I think this is critical to this story. They have the price on Steam. Now, they also had an anime, Edge Runners, which debuted on Netflix last week, which has been getting favorable reviews. So combination of half-price, Netflix show, and a big patch. What's happening now is this resurgence in interest in the game. My question to you guys, of those three things, what do you think was the biggest factor in this resurgence? A, or maybe you think it was something else other than those three things? And B, does this sustain? Will we be talking about Cyberpunk a year from now still having a healthy player base?
I mean, it's definitely the Netflix, I think. I mean, the patch was necessary because the game was like literally broken. But I think the Netflix show has brought a considerable amount of interest. And I think that's a huge trend, to watch, and actually very, very bullish for Netflix as we think about their potential, gaming ambitions. Because this is not the first time we've seen this with Netflix. If you remember, The Witcher had a similar resurgence. Witcher never really got unpopular, but it had a massive increase in its player base years after its launch when the Netflix show initially launched. So it kind of is proving that Netflix has the ability to kind of drive people into these games, which I think is really interesting as we think about Netflix's ambitions to become a bigger and bigger gaming company. to answer your second question, like I don't think just because Cyberpunk's a single player game, like I don't think a year from now we're going to still be people will still be as keen on it as they are now, but maybe they're able to put out the multiplayer version, and this kind of at least brings the franchise back from where I think it was at this time last year, which was basically dead, like literally, dead as a franchise. So great for CD Projekt Red, and I think even probably more important, very bullish for Netflix.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Jeff said. I think number one, that Steam price drop was probably super strategic and good on them to be like, oh, we're putting the Netflix show comes out. First thing people are going to do is pop over to Steam and search, and hey, we'll snag them. So some good kind of multi-channel marketing there. But I feel like I'm like a cynic over the years of being in the industry. Whenever someone puts a press release out like that, especially that quickly, it kind of makes me think, okay, I think they probably think this is their high, right? So I think they realized it was kind of the confluence of a bunch of really favorable things all happening at the same time, and that may not happen again. So yeah, agree with Jeff on probably where that trajectory is going to go over time.
I mean, we saw the whole Netflix phenomenon with F1, right? Like, the irony to me is thick here. If Netflix is the kingmaker of the games industry, right? Like if having a successful game depends on a Netflix show, I don't know. I'd be curious to see the data around like what Arcane did for League of Legends player base, right? League of Legends has always had a very healthy player base, but I'm sure they can measure like if there are statistically significant increases, around Arcane when it released. Like, I don't know. Is Netflix becoming the kingmaker in the gaming space? Ironically enough, we've been kind of tough on their gaming strategy.
And if maybe not even Netflix. I mean, I think it just shows this whole transmedia strategy, which we've been talking about now for like a couple of years. But at first, I think we were all, and everyone, the general like investing public, was fairly skeptical whether this whole strategy of creating a show, creating shoulder content would really work, because I think historically there were a lot of big flops. But it's kind of proving out that it is definitely working. You're seeing better engagement, driving people to the games. So yeah.
Jimmy, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add to kind of what you were hinting at, which was not only Netflix being a kingmaker here potentially, but what that's going to do for Netflix's own game business with all the games that they're going to have in development that they're slowly putting out, because there's clearly an intangible there, right? A factor of consumers that are hungry for this IP in one form or another. And I was just trying to pull up, I was looking at reviews on the Steam library, or on the Steam store, excuse me, and it's kind of interesting to look at when the reviews were made, over 2 years ago, huge gap, of no one playing for use, and then a lot of them within the last month or two of again, more positive reviews, and you kind of can correlate, I think, some of that with the Netflix show in particular.
Yeah, I'm a little bit with Nicole in that I put my cynic hat on for a second here, and I'm like, first of all, the show drives awareness, right? Like people, but I feel like it's relatively easy to make a decent cyberpunk show, right? Cyberpunk in general as a genre is kind of cool. Netflix pushes so much content every single week that everything new is going to get attention in general. And then you combine that with the price cut, and people are like, well, yeah, I'll try this thing. I thought the show was decent. I'll try this game. It doesn't necessarily mean the game is now good, right? Like the game could still not hold people. And then this feels a little bit like a bit of a cash grab tied to the show. Like I don't know if a game can go from being as bad as it was to something people will play for the next 2 or 3 years based on a show and a patch and a price cut. Nicole, sorry, you were going to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, you're bringing more people into the funnel, but if it's the same funnel, they're going to drip out the same way, right?
Yeah. Like the announcement is like, we filled the top of the funnel again. Yeah. That's basically what the announcement is. How many come out the other side. I don't know. Sorry, let me get caught up on comments here. LinkedIn user says, I pre-ordered Cyberpunk and played it for about 30 minutes before a broken mission stopped my progress. I think that was a lot of people's experience. And that, I'm sure I would hope they fixed the technical problems, because that's like basic. But the technical problems weren't the whole problem. It was just not a fun game. Matthew says, it seems like Netflix keeps nailing its video game adaptations. The Witcher, Arcane, now Cyberpunk. I mean, better than most, right? There are a lot of examples of really bad video game adaptations, but you're right. Netflix has done a good job so far. LinkedIn user says, maybe I shouldn't reveal this investment, but I bought a crypto coin called Saitama, and I'm hoping that when One Punch Man 3 comes out, it'll generate interest like Witcher and Cyberpunk have. I mean, I think we've shown here that other media other than gaming can drive interest in things gaming related. So I'm not familiar with, I don't know if you guys know any of those things, but I'm not familiar. JM says, to be fair, Arcane was just distributed by Netflix. However, I do agree their visibility seems to be favorable to gaming companies. I mean, it's just what I like about all these is it proves that the most subtle form of advertising tends to be the most effective, right? Arcane wasn't running going, go play League of Legends, 50 times throughout the show. They just made a good show that people like to watch, and then allowed people to sort of explore the universe further by, playing the games or whatever, buying things. But I think they did a good job of it being subtle. It was not in your face, like, we made this to drive people to our game. And I assume the Cyberpunk show is similar. I haven't watched it. I did watch some of Arcane. I don't know if you guys watched any of the Cyberpunk show.
I have not, but I feel like there's a difference in that, Arcane, there's 10 years worth of League players and fans. And so for that, it's as much of giving fans more of what they love, or it's almost like hey, thanks for being with us, here's this new gift of like a new experience, kind of like what we were talking about with Star Wars, right? Like a Star Wars video game probably at this point is going to create new Star Wars fans, but it's going to give different ways of engagement, where I feel like Cyberpunk, a game that was already a year old, had its issues. It's almost like okay, let's see if we can keep it going kind of thing. So maybe some different objectives.
Nicole, hearing you speak gave me a thought. Like, I feel like there's two ways to succeed in the industry from a media, like in gaming tied together perspective. You either make a good game and a good show, or both become a meme, right? You can either be good or a meme, and both of those paths lead to success. Being bad obviously leads to failure, but like Cyberpunk in some ways had become a meme. And the show maybe was them just smart enough to capitalize on the meme, right? Like people were, I'm going to go check it out because I thought Cyberpunk was terrible, right? The game. And so I'm going to probably, because it's on Netflix, I'm going to go check out the show because it's a meme. Jeff, you had a thought on that?
Yeah. Or
no, I think it's a funny thought. It wasn't where I thought you were going to go with it. I thought Nicole's point was pretty elegant about you can either engage or you can kind of try to open the top of the funnel. But your meme point is also a good one, I guess.
LinkedIn user says they tied Arcane into Valorant as well. I didn't know that. If they did, it was not in at least the couple of episodes I saw. Adam says James Hess. I guess Adam, you want James Hess to pay attention to this episode. I hope he does. Adam says Arcane was the reason I personally played League for the first time. That is telling. I think that's telling, right? To bring someone brand new into such an established game because of a show, and the fact that the game couldn't draw you in on its own before that, I think is incredibly telling. That the show maybe was a lower bar to get you into it, whereas the game maybe feels like a high bar, high learning curve, whatever. Matt says, it feels like Cyberpunk 2077 had a failed initial launch. Now that the show came out, it's reignited interest and led to a second launch. I mean, yeah, that is what's happening here. Christian says, anything to distract us from Chris Pratt being Mario. All right. We don't need any hate for Chris Pratt being Mario. It's uncalled for. It's like the jury's still out on that one, right? We don't know if it's going to be good or not. So we'll see. We have an Italian right here who can decide if it feels authentic enough. All right, guys, let's talk. I want to end. We have one last story here, and it's Logitech in the news. And this is a recurring theme on this show. We've talked about so many mobile gaming devices, and Logitech throwing their hat in the ring here. They've announced this is the headline from TechCrunch. They've announced a handheld console focused on cloud gaming.
Did we lose Paul?
I think we just lost Paul.
I think we did.
Okay.
Everybody panic.
I'm familiar with this story already. If you guys want to talk about it.
Yeah, tell us. What do you think, Jimmy?
I mean,
I don't understand how this is different than the Steam Deck or every other. I'm not super bullish. Like, why? Someone has to explain to me why this one is going to succeed. The Switch obviously succeeded, but that was, I think, due to the Nintendo exclusive content. It was a little bit innovative with it being a handheld, but like none of the handhelds that have come after that have done anything. So I think at this point I now am bearish unless I'm proven otherwise. So yeah, I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, that was my exact instinct was, okay, this is coming really quick after Steam Deck / after people could actually start to get their hands on Steam Deck, right? Feels like jury's out on how many of those can occupy one market within the span of a year before the next round of technology comes out and yeah, makes them obsolete.
Sorry guys, I thought all of you got dropped. It was me. I just wanted to say, I don't know if you heard it. I mentioned the introductory price is $299, and the company says they're going to increase the price to $349 eventually. And
wait, time out. They started at $399. They said they're going to increase
$299
the price. Sorry, they started at $299. They announced they're going to increase that. That like flies in the face of every single law of economics.
Well, what they're saying is buy it now.
That's why. I mean, you would always price your product high in the beginning because the initial demand you're capturing, and then from a supply perspective, you're always going to make it cheaper, in the future. So because you're producing more of them, so like it's a very odd thing to announce.
I mean, maybe they're, and Nicole, I think you were saying this as I got back in, maybe they're trying to blunt some of the success of Steam Deck, right? Steam Deck has been, by all accounts, a big success for Valve. Maybe Logitech just doesn't, they want to sort of cut off sort of Valve's advantage and underprice them, like price them under the Steam Deck and try and take that business away from Valve. I just want to mention the quote that was in the article because I think it's also another data point. This is from Ujesh from Logitech, who we had, by the way, on the podcast. He says, I'm a fan of Backbone. I love the team there, but my phone is my business. It's also how I talk with my family. I have the fear of my battery draining. Phones are also a source of distractions. So he's talking about the Backbone, which is like that device that you strap to your existing phone. And he's making the case that doesn't make sense because it's a device that has other uses, and therefore a dedicated device is the better way to go. Jimmy, I don't know if you had thoughts on this or if you did chime in on it, but I know you're a big mobile gamer.
Yeah. No, sorry guys, I was staying quiet. I was looking for exactly that episode, Paul, with Ujesh, which if you're okay with it, I'd love to drop here in the chat for everyone if they wanted to go back and listen to our feature there. I had my Steam Deck waitlist card or whatever, my number finally got called, and I messaged you, Paul, and I said, I still don't know how I feel about this. I'm kind of on the fence. I don't really want to order it. It's really expensive for something I'm going to play 2 games on, maybe not like. Can obviously flip it real quick if I don't decide to open it and use it, or if I do for a lesser amount. And I ended up not going with it just because it just wasn't all that appealing to me at the end of the day. The battery life was a big concern there. I do want a unique mobile device that's not my phone, to Ujesh's comments, which are here in the chat. If you guys check out that episode, but I do want a unique mobile device that I could play a game on in front of the TV. I don't always want to use my high-powered PC for something. And sometimes I just want to sit on the couch with my wife while she's watching a show, but I can game and kind of zone out and disconnect from it where we're together, but doing our own things there. And I do that a lot on my mobile phone or games on my mobile phone, but I don't thoroughly enjoy them. I'm interested to see what this does, just because if Xbox is supporting it, hopefully, that transition from console games to a portable mobile will be easy for them to accomplish. I'm not sure. This isn't something that we've seen Xbox do in the past, unlike PlayStation, unlike Nintendo. So I'm also interested from that perspective, just to see what they can do. And Logitech's a great partner. I think the hardware and the way that they evaluate hardware from a player-centric approach, where they say, how are gamers using this? What things do they like? What do they do? And how do we fix it or address those and those things and give them the tools they need? I do like that about Logitech in particular. Not to say that other hardware manufacturers don't have similar concerns, but it has the pieces that make this interesting to me. But to your guys' criticisms, yeah, like it's going to need to be more, right? It's going to need to be different. It's going to need to do these things better. And all we know is that they're trying. We don't know that there's any promise of it succeeding or being able to do that, other than what looks like a very nice entry price point and 2 big names that we're familiar with.
Yeah, I guess it's my role to be the critical one. I think this fails for sure, and I'll tell you why. It relies on cloud gaming services, which have not done well. So right off the bat, your universe of customers is quite small. You need intersection of people who currently subscribe to, whether it's NVIDIA GeForce Now or Xbox Cloud, one of these two, which is the two they name in the article. And you need to be so into those cloud gaming services that you want a dedicated device for it, right? That whatever device you're playing, you're using for those cloud gaming services not meeting your requirements. And what you're getting for about the same price as a Steam Deck is way worse hardware, because the Logitech device doesn't need to run anything. It just needs to display something that's being rendered in the cloud. With the Steam Deck, it's running on the Steam Deck. So that's the second reason you're paying for about the same money for inferior hardware. That maybe is not the killer. The real killer for this product is Valve has a different business model. Valve makes money off of selling games on their platform. They could lose money on the Steam Deck if they really cared to, and I think they're about breaking even on the Steam Deck. But they could lose money on the hardware if they thought it would sell more things on Steam. Logitech doesn't have this luxury, right? They have to make money on the hardware outright. And so you will always get sort of inferior hardware for the same dollar because they need profit margin baked in. And so I think there's so many headwinds here for Logitech. I don't really get who this is for that doesn't already have a solution for mobile gaming, right? Whether it's a Switch or a Steam Deck or their phone or their iPad. I feel like there's a lot of good options, and I'm not sure if the world needed this. I don't know if you guys have comments. I want to get caught up on the comments I missed. I guess when I got cut off, JM says this pause feels like EG versus TSM for any esports fans. That's a good reference. Kieran says, quick guys, get whatever the big boss won't let you say out now. JM says, I don't think the Logitech handheld's going to last. I agree, JM. Matthew says, is this necessary? Doesn't feel like Steam Deck was the hit people hoped it would be. I mean, for Valve, I think it's been a hit. I don't know if you guys seen other like specific numbers, but everything I've heard is they're extremely happy with how Steam Deck has sold, and that's why they're making a second one.
Well, I think to your point, the business model is as much the software bit of it and driving people to be purchasing those games through them versus others. So it's, again, I've used the word funnel too much in this conversation, but another way to get more people into the Steam/Valve funnel.
Chris says, I'm at a cannabis conference with my Retroid Pocket 3 in tow while watching you guys. Let's talk about distractions. Good luck, Logitech. I mean, Chris, you make a good point though, because I think those retro mobile consoles, they're usually cheaper, and I get why people would play those, because it's really the best way to play some of those older games. And so I get why you would want a dedicated piece of hardware for that. Matt says, all I'm saying is I've yet to see a person playing a Steam Deck out in public. And Chris says, same, Gideon. But I don't see Switches out in the wild either. I mean, that's kind of true, but they've sold a lot of Switches. So I'm not sure if that holds up just because we don't see them in the wild. Because I agree, I don't see them in the wild either. But
you guys should come to all the kids' soccer games I'm at. There's kids on the sidelines everywhere. Yeah, you're just hanging out at the right places.
That's it. Kieran says, I've used GeForce Now and Shadow PC. Shadow PC blows GeForce Now out of the water. Kieran, I agree. And in fact, we had, I think a long time ago, we had someone from Shadow PC on the podcast. And unfortunately, they sort of went out of business, and now they're back in business. But they did have a superior technical solution for cloud gaming. Matt says, I feel like I see Switches occasionally at people's homes when I go visit friends. I've yet to see a Steam Deck. Matt, I can't reach it here, but I do have a Steam Deck. So I'll show you on the next live stream. All right, guys. Unless anyone has anything else to comment, that wraps up this week's news episode, weekly news episode. I just want to special thanks, Nicole. Thank you for being on the live show this week. Really appreciated having you. Really appreciate all of the stuff, all the contributions from YouGov and that extra level of insight we get from you and YouGov. So really appreciate. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, we love it. Thanks to BOE for everything.
Thank you, obviously, to everyone who came and commented. We really appreciate you guys. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jimmy, as always. Don't forget, guys, go check out yougov.com/BOE. Don't forget a lot of really free and amazing data on there that you can check out. And don't forget to follow Business of Esports everywhere, on Instagram, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on TikTok, you name it. You can get Business of Esports content on every single platform. There's no excuse. Go follow us on all those platforms. And bring a friend, bring a colleague every week, Wednesdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. We really appreciate when people are here live, even though we know so many of you listen and watch after the fact. But try and make it live, Wednesdays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. We appreciate all of you. William says another great one. Thank you so much, William. William's podcast episode is this week. So go check that out. And Adam says, have a great rest of your day all. Thank you, Adam, for being here. Don't forget, guys, the future is fun. We will see you next week.